Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. It was a cold evening in late January, the kind of evening where the wind cuts right through your coat and even the neon lights of the city feel tired. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at a stack of envelopes she hadn't opened yet. Rent was due in 5 days, and she already knew what each envelope contained: reminders, overdue notices, quiet threats written in bold letters. She rubbed her temples, the cheap fluorescent light above her flickering like it was mocking her situation. She had worked double shifts at a diner all month, barely sleeping, barely breathing, and yet, the math didn't add up. No matter how many tips she counted or hours she logged, she was always a few $100s short. It felt like living on a treadmill that never slowed down, no finish line, just exhaustion. Her phone buzzed. It was her friend, Jenna, sending a link with a short message. "This saved me last month. Try it." Sarah rolled her eyes. She had seen dozens of make money quick links, videos, promises that all felt like scams. But desperation makes you do things you wouldn't normally consider. She clicked. The page opened to a website she had never heard of, nothing flashy, just a simple headline: "Turn your ideas into income with free AI tools." It sounded ridiculous. How could a website, free at that, help her pay rent? She almost closed it right then. But something, maybe exhaustion or maybe a fragile thread of hope, kept her scrolling. The site introduced a free AI tool that could take plain text and turn it into audiobooks, guided journals, even digital bedtime stories. It explained that thousands of people were already using it to create content, some for their kids, some for podcasts, and some even selling these creations online. Sarah didn't know the first thing about content creation. She didn't own a fancy microphone, didn't have a polished YouTube channel, and honestly, she was embarrassed by how little she understood about technology. But there was something in the testimonials that pulled her in. One read, "I paid my electric bill last month just from 3 short stories I sold online." Sarah leaned back in her chair. She thought about the stories she used to tell her little brother years ago, back when their parents worked night shifts and she was the one putting him to bed. Stories about imaginary kingdoms, about small heroes who fought giants not with swords but with kindness. She remembered how his eyes sparkled when she described dragons who preferred baking bread over burning villages, or foxes who solved mysteries with riddles. She had buried that part of herself in the grind of surviving adulthood. Could those silly stories really help her now? The first night, she stayed up past midnight, writing one of those old tales in a notebook. She hesitated before uploading it into the AI tool, half expecting her laptop to explode or the site to ask for her credit card. But it was truly free. Within minutes, the screen filled with colorful illustrations, and a soft, childlike narration began telling her story back to her. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. Her words, the ones she thought had no value, suddenly sounded alive. She exported the file, still skeptical, and uploaded it to a small marketplace for digital content. She went to bed with no expectations. The next morning, she opened her email. A notification blinked at the top: "You made your first sale, $7.99. Sarah froze. $7 wasn't much, but it was $7 she hadn't begged for, borrowed, or broken her back for. It was her words. Her creativity. Her heart. She laughed, and then unexpectedly, she cried. For the first time in months, the tears weren't about hopelessness but about possibility. Over the next week, she worked obsessively. She wrote every free moment, on napkins during diner breaks, on the back of receipts while waiting for buses, typing furiously into her phone before bed. She uploaded story after story, experimenting with the AI voices and illustrations. The sales trickled in at first, $5 here, $12 there, until one night she noticed she had crossed $300 in earnings. She stared at the number, her hands shaking. That was groceries for the month. That was a piece of her rent. That was breathing space. But success didn't arrive without storms. One evening, her landlord knocked, impatient and stern. "You're still behind," he said flatly. Sarah tried to explain she was working on it, but his eyes told her he had heard it all before. That night, she broke down. What if this little spark of hope wasn't enough? What if she ended up homeless, her laptop useless in a shelter somewhere? She almost quit right there. But she remembered something she had once told her brother in one of those bedtime stories. Heroes don't quit just because the world says they should. They quit only if their own heart gives up. She couldn't let her heart quit, not now. So she kept going. By week 3, Sarah had joined small online communities of other creators. She learned how to title her stories so they would appear in searches, how to design simple covers using free templates, how to share links in parenting groups. It wasn't overnight magic, it was small, steady effort. But slowly, the sales grew. Parents emailed her saying their kids loved the stories, that they wanted more. A mother in Ohio wrote, "My autistic son finally sleeps through the night listening to your stories. Thank you." Sarah printed that email and taped it above her desk. Whenever doubt crept in, she read it again. And then, at the end of that month, Sarah opened her payment dashboard and gasped. $1,472. Enough to cover rent, with a little left over for groceries. She sat in silence for a long time, staring at the screen, the same way you stare at a sunrise you didn't expect to see after a storm. She paid her landlord the next day, slipping the check into his hand with a quiet, steady confidence he hadn't seen from her before. Her journey didn't stop there. Sarah began creating themed collections, stories about kindness, bedtime adventures, even interactive journals for teens. She expanded into audiobooks, then YouTube videos, using free AI to generate engaging visuals. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building. Each month, her income grew, not into riches, but into stability. She could breathe. She could plan. She could dream again. And as she grew, so did her gratitude. In one of her later videos, she looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're watching this and you feel like you're drowning, I want you to know, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need thousands of dollars. Sometimes, all you need is one free tool, one idea, and the courage to start." I was where you are right now. If this story gives you hope, please subscribe to this channel, because here, we share more real stories of people turning struggle into strength with the help of AI. And maybe next time, it will be your story I'm telling. The comment section of that video exploded. People wrote their own struggles, their own beginnings, their own tiny sparks of success. Some said they were trying the same AI tool. Some said they just needed the encouragement. And Sarah replied to as many as she could, building not just an income, but a community. Months later, when she visited her brother, now in college, he asked her how things were going. She smiled, pulled out her phone, and showed him the dashboard with a steady monthly income. He hugged her tightly, whispering, "You always told me your stories would change the world. I guess you were right." And she realized in that moment. The rent was just the beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing, the next one might just be your story.